Gary, we've just had the jobs numbers out. We've been talking about it for the last hour and a half or so. Nice rise in the number of jobs, but the wage growth wasn't that great. We've heard from the president before that he's concerned not just about the number of jobs, but the quality of jobs. We've also heard that one of the things that you really want to do is use trade policy to make sure we have high-paying jobs on this continent still. Are you as focused on the question of losing jobs to technology?
So David, look, we are very concerned about the wage inflation and wage growth. And we think it's an area that we do need to attack in the United States. We've been trying to create inflation in the United States for the better part of 8 years, and wage inflation is one of the major inflation categories. What we are concerned about is some of our better paying jobs going overseas. And we've been talking about that quite a bit in the White House over the first 2 weeks here. I think you're well aware we've had many CEO groups in, and when we talk to our different CEO groups, whether from manufacturing industry, the automobile industry, the pharma industry, or the CEO group that we're having here today, undoubtedly the first issue that comes up as a hindrance for them doing business in the United States and them creating more higher paying jobs in the United States is regulation. It comes up before taxes. Taxes comes up as the second issue, then infrastructure comes up as the third issue. So obviously we're going to spend a lot of time, and you'll see it today with some of our executive orders in the financial services. We're spending time trying to help industry in this country alleviate some of the burdensome regulations that force jobs offshore. We want to bring the high paying jobs back to America.
So, Gary, did you just give us the priorities in their order? That is to say, what is the first concrete, significant step we're going to see in this pro-growth agenda? Is it deregulation?
That is one of our top priorities. We have a couple priorities that go sort of hand in glove with each other. We've got some legislative priorities, but from the executive office, the number one priority we have is job growth. Number two priority is job growth. And by the way, the number three priority is job growth. Yeah. So whatever we need to do to grow jobs in this country, we're going to do. And what we've been told, and we've been told consistently, we need to deregulate and cut down the regulatory process to grow jobs in this country. So yes, that is our number one White House priority.
So let's turn now to your announcement today of the review of Dodd-Frank as an example of that proposal to deregulate. Can you get where you need to go without going through Congress?
We can do quite a bit of what we need to do. Obviously, we're going to work with Congress. I met this morning with Jeb Hensarling and his committee members to talk about what we can do with the House. The House wants to be very active and very helpful with us as well in what we do in financial service regulation. We are going to engage the House. We're going to engage the Senate. They are equally interested in reforming some of the regulatory processes as well. We can do quite a bit without them, but the more help we get from Congress, the better off we're all going to be in making the job creation vehicle more effective. Not just in financial services. We're talking about regulation in every different industry group. When the automobile manufacturers were in here, they were talking about what they have to do with the EPA and the other regulators. When the manufacturers were in here, they were talking about different regulatory groups in manufacturing. So we're going to need help from the House, we're going to need help from the Senate, and we're going to give them help from the White House as well.
So as you say, there's a wide panoply of potential regulations that could be trimmed back on, but let's stick with the financial regulations right now because that's what you announced just today. Let's be specific. You know Dodd-Frank as well as anybody in the country, given your experience at Goldman Sachs. As you look at Dodd-Frank, what are the specific areas that you think need to be really changed?
Well, let's look at the big issue. The overarching issue that we want to fix is we want to get the banks working again. We want banks to be back in the lending business. What we think Dodd-Frank has done is it has stopped banks from lending to small and medium-sized businesses. It stopped banks from lending to entrepreneurs. We know that the big job creators in this country are entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized businesses. Banks have been forced to hoard capital. They have not been allowed to lend money. We need to get them back into the lending business. That's our number one priority, is to get capital flowing back into the small and medium-sized businesses.
But if that's your number one priority, does that suggest that, for example, really changing or repealing the Volcker Rule is not that important to you because it's hard to draw the direct line between the Volcker Rule on the one hand and getting lending going to smaller businesses?
Every place a bank needs to hold capital and they need to retain capital prohibits them from lending. So we're going to attack all aspects of Dodd-Frank. Volcker Rule, we also care about deep liquid, transparent, and orderly markets. The United States has a huge competitive advantage in having deep, liquid, orderly, and transparent markets. We want to preserve that competitive advantage. So we are going to be looking at the Volcker Rule as well, but a lot of what we're trying to do is free up capital and free up regulatory costs. All the banks in this country have been hugely burdened by enormous regulatory costs.
So on the Volcker Rule, just to continue that one more time, we had Steve Mnuchin, the nominee for Treasury Secretary, testify in front of Congress, suggesting he was not for repealing the Volcker Rule. He thought it should be simplified, there should be changes. Is that the White House position, that you don't want to do away with the Volcker Rule?
So look, we are not anti-regulation. I think Treasury Secretary-designate Steve Mnuchin said that. I'll say it too. We are not against regulation. We want smart regulation that allows our financial service to be the envy of the world. We want highly capitalized banks. We want well-regulated banks, but we want banks that function. We want markets that function. We want lending to function. So we're very supportive of a highly functioning market that is well-regulated.
So let's take another look at another aspect of Dodd-Frank, that orderly liquidation authority, the OLA, so to speak, living will. Where is the White House on that? Where are you on that? Is that a problem?
Yes, we think it's a problem. When we're going to deal with the problem. You know, no one has proven and no one can prove that orderly liquidation works. There's controversy to the plans, whether the plans are viable or the plans are not viable. We need to get some type of mechanism that we all agree works under every scenario. The one thing that Dodd-Frank never really dealt with, it never really dealt with too big to fail. We need to deal with too big to fail. We need to deal with no government bailouts. I think that's an area where Dodd-Frank said they were going to deal with, and they never really actually dealt with it.
So as an alternative to OLA, would you favor simply using the bankruptcy laws?
Look, there are a couple different alternatives. We're working with the House. We're working with Jeb Hensarling and his team, and we're exploring the different options that are out there. But we are comfortable that we can come up with a suitable solution.
So, Gary, as you list these priorities, you have a lot on your platter, I think it's fair to say. You've got a big agenda here. Who within the White House, and is it you, is setting priorities about where you devote time and attention and capital? I mean, not just you, but the president. For example, does something like the executive order on immigration distract the administration?
Look, there are many of us working in the White House. We all have our areas of expertise, and we're all trying to work in our areas of expertise. That said, we're trying to create a collegial community of working together in the White House.
And so is there some way of working through what's going first, what's going second? We're going to spend some time on foreign relations now. We're going to get to reform of the regulatory system later. How does that get done, the traffic copping?
Well, look, the White House is a multifaceted, multidimensional organization. We don't get the luxury of just working on one topic at a time, and nor do you in any other large, multifaceted corporation. We've got many different issues going on simultaneously. We come in the morning and we maybe think we're working on one issue, and by lunchtime we're working on a completely different issue. We have to be able to be adaptable, and we have to be able to change very quickly on what we're working on to make sure we're dealing with what's most time sensitive. And the White House is no different. We find ourselves being very adaptable and dealing with the issues of the day.
And finally, Gary, you've referred to how much actually has been done. A lot has been done in the first 2 weeks of this administration, goodness knows. But a fair amount of it has involved currency. We had Peter Navarro, for example, just earlier this week come out and talk about Germany and how it's getting sort of a free ride in Europe. Is it part of the policy, economic policy of this administration, to really address trade issues in a significant way through currency?
So look, on trade, we care about fair trade, fair and free trade. All we want to achieve is fair and free trade in the world. We understand that the United States is a big trading nation. We're an importer and an exporter. We import and export with many of the same countries. All we want to do is have a level, fair platform to trade from.